Joining me on Startup Report today is David Sawyer, the founder of TSOLife. Welcome, sir.
Thanks for having me. Excited.
So let's dig into TSOLife. Obviously, it's a really cool subject matter, weird juxtaposition of technology and older folks. What's the rundown on what TSOLife is?
So really high level, what TSOLife does, it helps people record their life stories and pass them on seamlessly to their families. So we got started with TSOLife about going on 5 years ago after I actually lost my grandmother.
Mm-hmm.
And I was sitting at her funeral and I was listening to a story about how she met my grandfather. And I realized that I never got to hear that story from her.
Mm-hmm.
And as the night went on, I was hearing story after story after story of her life. I just quickly realized how little I got to know her. I mean, she was always this awesome woman that would bake me cookies and help me out with my spelling homework, but I never got the time to get to know her as a person, get to hear what her favorite moments were, what she wished she accomplished but never got to, and what some of her happiest, proudest moments were. So we really created TSOLife as a place for her to have been able to leave those life stories behind for her family.
That's great. And it's an interesting time with that too, is there's been a bloom of startups. You have the whole 23andMe and I guess the other one with the family tree that's out there that they've been going pretty hard and introducing the idea of understanding your family. And then, of course, now we have with phones recording and all that sort of stuff, the idea of personal recording. And you're marrying the two at a really good time, where people are conscious of the family thing, understanding of the technology, and you found a new place to plug it in.
Which is pretty exciting. So yeah, this has definitely been something that's been on the forefront of people's mind. Genealogy is actually the second most searched topic online behind only adult entertainment.
Yeah.
I don't think we're ever taking over adult entertainment, but 92 million Americans every year look up information about a loved one for trying to get a sense of who they were. So basically, we kind of did a hard dive deep look into genealogy and realized that there is an entire industry surrounded around the fact that this information is hard to come by. People can't find it. You need to go pay a genealogist to go track down different public source records to piece together someone's life story. And we're just kind of like, well, no, duh. We'll just give you a tool to do it yourself. And so that way your family doesn't need to go through all this research later.
So why'd you do that? Why and what was your mindset then when you were you, I guess this digs into a little bit of who you were as an entrepreneur going into this, but why were you digging into that and what lens were you doing that through?
Well, really, it was because of just my personal loss of my grandmother and just realizing that, I'm never going to get the chance to do that over. I'm never going to go find a TSOLife account for her, listen to her tell me these stories. Even in thinking about it, how little I have with her actual voice on it is almost astounding and almost scary. And you get to this point where you start forgetting what your loved ones sound like. So that's really why we created it, was just a great personal need.
What was your business sort of trajectory before that? Were you an entrepreneur before that, or were you an employee, or what was your vibe then?
I was sleeping through second period French. I was a college student.
Got it.
So we actually were the only startup, I like to say, that found a way to start in a worse environment than a garage, and it was actually a shared dorm room. So literally a 200 square foot that was shared between me and another dude. We were trying to bang out the startup. So from there, we worked on it for about 2 years. I started up a entrepreneurship group over at Stetson University in Actus. It was to help people kind of do social good through entrepreneurship, and TSO was one of the projects we worked on, and eventually it just rolled into a company.
Got it. And the dorm mate, is he still involved at all, or when did he eject out?
So the dorm room, that was like a quick 2-minute thing, but really I did meet my co-founder Stella. She was part of that core entrepreneurship group.
Okay.
And she's been going with us now for 4.5 years.
That's fantastic. So obviously, I'm involved with seed funders, and we talked a little bit before we started recording. And since seed funders has started, you're the first company we play a little bit earlier than Florida funders.
Yeah.
And so it worked out pretty nicely in that. I know you had been talking to Dave Chittister for quite a while, but for us to invest early, and then about a year and a half later, you grow, you get some great contracts in place, and then you move into a relationship with Florida funders at a nice higher valuation and a bigger round. Can you kind of walk us through the fundraising experience for you?
Yes, the fundraising experience has been interesting. We were really self-funded when we got going. My family definitely helped us out with the initial capital needs to kind of build out the site. And from there, we kind of were piecemealing it together, trying to get individual angels, putting in 15, 20K at a time.
Right.
And, half my time was spent trying to chase those small little checks to kind of keep the company runway going.
Right.
I like to hear all the time where people talk about how, I only have 12 months worth of runway, and people feel like that's a short amount. And I'm like, The longest I was ever funded between when I started the company and 2018 when seed funders invested in that 4-year period
Yeah.
was less than 3 months.
Wow.
The longest runaway I had was 90 days once, and I was like, "What do I do with myself?" So and that's how we built the company for the first, like, 3 years, was consistently fundraising to make payroll, to keep up with the development needs, and try to chase customers, and it was just borderline impossible. So seed funders stepped in, I met with Dave, and, you guys invested 150K at once, and that gave us 9 months of runway, and I'm like, "Wow, what do I do now?" So from there, I was able to focus my time away from fundraising and actually focus on growing the business, going to conferences, actually getting out and talking to more customers and taking more risks. Where before we would just be, only to keep the lights on, but now we actually had some growth capital to go out there and actually see if our product had a product market fit. And thankfully, we were able to prove that out pretty quickly in short order. We got a pretty big contract with Meridian, who was our first customer. We rolled it out to one of their sites, and then within 3 months, they saw an increase in occupancy, a lower staff turnover rate. CEO came in and said, "I want this in all 85 of my buildings." And since then, we've been rolling that out. And as soon as we started the rollout process, Florida Funders said, "Okay, there's probably something there." So
Right.
they came in a little less than a year later. You guys invested in January. They wrote us a term sheet in November.
Yeah.
So we were able to turn that around pretty quickly, which was exciting.
And there was a little bit of a product pivot in there as well, B2C to B2B.
We had about 5 pivots.
5 pivots, okay. A
5
pirouette
pivots.
then.
We did a full 180, 720, and 360 in there. We went from B2C to focusing on having people record your own little life story.
Mhm,
We then focused in heavily on the genealogy market.
mhm.
We then made a pivot over to the funeral home industry. We then made a pivot back to B2C, made another pivot over to where we're actually at now, which is senior living. And so what we do is we give communities and senior living a tool for their caregivers to be able to record their residents' life stories. And why that's important, it is actually proven to help. We just released a 6-month case study with one of our customers. They did it across 7 of their buildings. And on average, they saw a 7.5% increase in occupancy across all 7, a decrease of 17% in staff turnover, which ended up saving them $7,000 a month in overtime. So we're able to show them a whole lot of ROI, which was exciting.
And do you consult with them on how to present the product to prospective residents? I mean, obviously the marketing, as much as they work that into their marketing, they can receive the full benefit of that.
So they definitely get a lot of benefit from just talking about how they offer the program and really helping them differentiate themselves in the marketplace. But another big fact of this, which is pretty cool, is legacy preservation is helping them get customer insight,
Hmm.
understand who their resident is, who actually lives there. And so if I'm doing a tour on a building and you find out that I'm the biggest Steelers fan ever, you could go on TSOLife, type in Steelers real quick. Up will pop all your residents' life stories with Steelers, and you could go, "Wow, this one actually saw them win a Super Bowl. I
Mm.
should go in and meet that person, have lunch together."
Very
And so
nice.
now I
Yeah.
have an instant friend. I have a connection. This is no longer a strange place with a stranger. I just met a cool dude that loves the Steelers too, that I can see myself going and hanging out with on Sundays. So it really removes some of the stigma of a social isolation and the worry about moving into a new place.
That's huge. Yeah. I mean, in a big sea of choices, just that one connection with somebody that they instantly can have a conversation with, that seals the deal on the spot most of the time, I would
It is
imagine.
huge. It 100% does. And that's where communities have seen a lot of ROI for that, is they understand, the whole concept of just legacy preservation. It was kind of just a nice to have,
Yeah.
not a necessity, but through kind of innovating in the industry, we've been able to prove out the ROI, prove out the business case and why this makes sense and why communities should put this as a core thing that they do.
Sure. Benefit now, benefit forever. That's
Exactly.
great. I do want to dig a little bit. So, I've been in the world of startups forever, had my own. I've done 2 rounds, 3 rounds in the last 2 years. You know, I always am curious to hear cash flow runway, 3 months. That's grueling, right? After many, many months of living with that, that cliff looming ahead. How did you deal with that in your brain? And, tell me that. Dig into that
Excessive
experience.
drinking. No, I'm kidding. Kind of. Well, jeez. It's one of those things where, and it's funny. So doing these life story interviews, I got to interview a lot of really cool people, and I'll never forget this. I was talking to a guy that ran a company for 40 plus years, and I kind of asked him about, what are some of the highlights of running the business, and he was like, "Well, I mean, after doing it for so long and for how many ups and downs we have, I really didn't have any high points because if I allowed myself to get excited and really put a lot of emotion into it, the low points would have took me out completely. So instead of trying to do this roller coaster, he had this steady just flow all the way through it, almost this very tempered attitude to everything. And I found that's been very helpful for doing this in that, when we have a big breakthrough, I'm not jumping up and down. I'm not getting excited. I'm not letting my drive for running the startup be tied to emotion.
Mm-hmm.
Because when we get in those situations where we're having these really scary moments, there's really low points. I mean, you almost dig yourself a bigger crate unless you're that calm, centered person. So I found that's been a really helpful mindset for helping me overcome some of those really low points and obstacles. I will say that I definitely didn't always have that mindset. It's one that I've had to develop over the 5 years now. So some of the early things that were really helpful is having a family that supported what I was doing.
Mm-hmm.
There have been times where, to be completely frank and honest, TSO would have failed. We would have failed if my parents didn't write us a loan, period.
Right.
And so that's one of the great things that I'm truly blessed with, to have parents that were capable of doing that and recognizing a lot of people didn't have that opportunity. So I consider myself extremely lucky and blessed to have that. Two, having a great co-founder who is just an absolute rock. I found a Russian who just doesn't have emotions anyway, so she's been fantastic for
Yeah.
keeping me tempered. Sorry, Stella, that was a joke. No, but so that's been huge, is having a great co-founder that can help keep me level, give me someone to vent to, understands what I'm going through, and we have a really big, just open transparency
Mm-hmm.
between us. So anything going on with the company, she knows it, and vice versa, and that's been great for helping that. And then two, we were previously doing this up in DeLand, Florida, and we were basically the only startup within a 100-mile radius. I like to joke about in DeLand, Florida.
Yeah.
There's just nothing going on. So when we moved over to Tampa in the St. Pete area too, it was just awesome to see that there's really a startup community here. There's a lot of people that want to invest and see these startups succeed and are working hard to do it. So we became members of the Tampa Bay Wave, which was great. We worked with Florida funders in helping us nail out our business model. So we were able to get the right people around.
Mm-hmm.
And a big part of this too is we got Ben Potts, who is over at Deepwater Capital. He was an early person that was involved in the company and helping us out in mentoring, and just his insight and mentorship has been invaluable to the company. So one thing I always tell entrepreneurs when you're getting started is you got to find that mentor that's been there, that gets it, that's done it, who can give you the right advice, who can tell you what you need to hear and not want to hear. And that's been just truly helpful.
When you were, you had mentioned the time that your family stepped in and you were kind of at the edge and the loan helped you. When you were at that edge, what was the thing you were most dreading feeling had you gone over that edge? Was it your identity being tied to TSOLife? Was it just time invested?
Well, it's one of those things where you hate to let people down.
Mm-hmm.
At the time we had 3 other people who were working for TSO, and that was just soul crushing to see how much they put into it.
Right.
Myself, my co-founder, we never took a paycheck for the first 4 years.
Right.
And so that's to an extent really distracting, disheartening. It's really sad too. I know investors may calculate a risk. They never invest anything they're not expecting to, but just having to make those phone calls where telling investors, hey, the 50K you put in,
Yeah.
oops. That was never a phone call I wanted to make. And I think anytime you take someone's money, you're always going to have that fiduciary mindset that you need to do right by this person, and just feeling that level of failure would just be horrible. I was an athlete all my life, so I hate losing without a doubt. So just the thought of losing the game of this company is horrible. But two, it just, we really started this company with a mission and a vision in mind.
Mm-hmm.
I like to say that TSOLife was started by basically just a grandkid that missed his grandmother.
Mm-hmm.
And we really believe that every day we're not helping every grandparent tell their life story is another grandkid that's going to miss out on that opportunity to get to know them.
Right.
So just really failing that mission and being, it's one thing if we got taken out by someone who just got market share 100%, they're doing great, that worry wouldn't be as prevalent, but there's not many people no one's really succeeding at this.
Right.
So if we fail, it's because of our own failure to execute, not because of someone else succeeding better than us.
Interesting. And then layering in family to that too, taking money, like I said, all depends on the family dynamic, but that certainly adds another layer of responsibility.
Oh yeah. No, and it's one of those things where, my younger brother, 3 years younger, for the first 3 years of the company, I'm going to get sad talking about this, but he's taken all of his Christmas money and just put into the company for us. And this kid, is my little brother. I should be, if anything, helping him out in life. And he'd take $5,000 every single Christmas that he made for everything and just put it into the company. So just having so many people believe in me and what we're doing, it's just that overwhelming fear of letting them down is always definitely there. It's really interesting when working with that shift from when you have the initial core people in the company, those founders, the ones that got there and who get it,
Mm-hmm.
who there and they're putting in 80 hours a week.
Mm-hmm.
And then you hit this random point where you now are hiring employees and they're taking your money. They're not caring about the
Precious money.
company's precious money.
Yeah.
And, I had this mindset too, where I'm literally like, my parents, they took a second mortgage on one of their houses to fund us for 3 months. And that money is literally coming from my parents'
Mm-hmm.
retirement to fund this. And then employees that are just, you look over and they're sitting there on Facebook when we're trying to get stuff done and have deadlines. And it's like, I want to throw a chair through the window.
Yeah.
It's like, it's just such a different environment where it's so difficult, I think, for founders to make that pivot when you just understand how precious money is and you go to people and they're just not doing their job and you're like, I don't understand this. So it's a weird paradigm where I think every founder at some point needs to switch over to now being a manager of people who view this as a job.
Right.
And it's such an interesting shift that I always wonder how people get it. I mean, we're still struggling with it. So it's interesting to see that shift and how you need to kind of change how you motivate people.
Sure. And what have you come up with?
Violence. No, I'm kidding. We're still working on it. I mean, it's one of those things where we're running into it right this second where, we have people come in, you're supposed to work a 40-hour work week. Previously I didn't need to tell people like, hey, make sure you get your 40 hours of work in because we used to be doing 80, 90, 100. It just never occurred to me that I needed to remind people to do their job and at least put the time in.
Right.
So we're having this now where people are showing up at 9:30 and sometimes leaving at 4:30 and they're taking an hour-long lunch.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I'm not the best at math, but help me out with these numbers a little. And so it's one of those things where it's now like, I've never felt the need to have to set a policy around lunch
Sure.
breaks and how it would affect your total work hours. And I'm like, it's interesting that these are some of the problems I'm solving now. And it's one of those things where it goes back to something that Ben taught me is like, as you grow the startup, just your problems change.
Yep.
Previously, it was me trying to find someone to give a shit about what we're doing and listen to me for 2 minutes to try to sell them product.
Mm-hmm.
Now it's we have customers and we're like growing, and now it's people that's the problem, and it's internal people that's the problem, where it's execution risk, it's getting the right people risk, and it's a very interesting dynamic we're facing currently.
Sure. I mean, I think it's probably a losing battle to try to put the emphasis on time worked, versus outcomes, right? If you can put a measurable outcome, that's where people bring in competition. If 3 or 4 people are doing the same job, how much are they actually producing? And then you can just base it on what comes out versus what some people work faster than others. And I mean, it's just a weird variation of the logic we used to have in the agency world. Is I had a marketing agency, was if you charge by hours, you're actually punishing your most successful people, because the people who work the fastest and are the most efficient, are your best employees, but the ones who are the slowest and have to redo things a bunch actually earn more money if you go. And so it's just really shifting into an output and quality mindset.
Yeah, no, because Bill Gates did that too, where he's like, we should be done based on lines of code, not time work, because you're incentivizing me to work slower to bill you for more.
Yeah.
And so that's definitely not the problem we're running into. It's a mixture of both, which
culture's a tricky,
It is.
And every, to your point, every layer you add can completely shift the culture, because at some point you'll get to the point where you've got employees that you've never really sat down and talked with, because they're just, and they're a couple layers abstracted from you, and all of a sudden, you walk in and like, I've seen you before, and they're,
Jeez,
they're
I
your
know.
employee, right? And that's a whole nother realm. And that's the age old question, is when does because not all founders make great CEOs, and that's why they become the visionaries and step to the side and create new products and lead new things and stuff. But
It's definitely an interesting thing. And, that's a big thing, is always learning and never just burying your head in the sand, and surrounding yourself with mentors that can help you through these challenges. Because now I'm getting, coaches on, how do you manage people? Not just how do you inspire, how do you actually manage? And you just consistently running into new challenges that they don't train you about in school.
mm-hmm.
I wholeheartedly believe the most worshipped worthless thing you can teach in college is entrepreneurship because no textbook will ever tell you any of this. And no course can ever emulate what this is actually like. So it's just really real world experience and just being able to consistently learn on the fly, which is huge.
So being in this weird spot, I'm curious to know, you're transitioning into an operational necessity, or to the operational leadership necessity. Having this fundraising just, so baked into who you are and growing this, and how do you feel right now? Is if I were to say to you in 15 years, or say 10 years, are you going to be the CEO of TSOLife running day-to-day operations? Or will it be a successful company with a different CEO and you're out building 6 sub-products? Or how do you kind of feel about, where you'll be in 10 years just from a place in the world kind of vibe?
I don't know where I'm going to be at tomorrow. But I mean, I would, I care very passionately about this. I believe there's so much more we can do with it. I mean, right now we're really helping people in senior living. I mean, there's in-home care. There's still the do-it-yourself B2C market. There is so much that can be used for this too. And then just the societal value of having these life stories preserved. I mean, right now we're grasping at straws to get Holocaust victims' stories preserved, World War II stories preserved. If this product existed and we just had all of this, just societal benefit moving forward would be tremendous. So there's so many places that this company can evolve and go on to. And so I definitely hope I'm still there involved with it and very active in it. Because the hunger is definitely there. And I think it's one of those things where, as an athlete, I was a collegiate athlete, you could tell when people weren't trying to go to the next level because they were checking themselves out. They know this was as high in the sport as they want to go, and
Right.
they had a great run at it. They got what they want out of it, and the next step wasn't for them.
Right.
And I definitely think you probably get that way as a CEO and founder too, where it's, okay, I got this thing to this point. I could exit for 20 mil. Let me do that. I'm good.
Yeah.
So I definitely don't think that my mindset is anywhere close to that. If someone offered me a quarter, $200 million tomorrow, it might change really quickly. But for just where I see it going, I'm definitely in it for the long run.
Can you dig a little bit into the dynamics of your partnership? Obviously cash flow, stress, not taking paychecks, and it sounds like you have a great partner. What are some of the the things that you've uncovered or insights you've gained from going through that with a partner?
Well, it's definitely really interesting in that because we were very, very good friends in college and then evolved into like best friends from it. Everyone always assumes we're together, like 24/7. It's something that's always been a pet peeve of both of ours. Let me just me and Stella are not together. It's on record. There we go. I have a very happy girlfriend right now. Anyways, so that's always been a friction with outside people, and that at times they don't really respect her because they always just assume that she's my assistant. She's there because of other reasons, and I mean, this is the hardest working person I know,
Yeah.
and it's always been a annoyance for us was the fact that people always made that assumption. I guess just the nature of the reality, but the way that partnership's been really helpful is that we have very clear lines at what we're good at.
Hmm.
She is great at operations, detail oriented, executes, is able to pick up a task and just do it. I'm very much more strategic, more numbers, analytic based, set more of the strategy. Um, I enjoy doing these type of events, talking in public, meeting with investors and clients. If she could communicate only through email, I think she would be happiest person in the world. So it just very clear divides in that we just have different strengths altogether. So that's been really helpful for both of us to be able to have that clear separation and divide. Because it's one of those things where like they say you end up like marrying an investor when you bring someone in because you're gonna be with them for 7 years. You're definitely married to your co-founders.
All right.
So you really have to be able to work well with that person, like that person, be able to hang out with that person because at the end of the day, I mean, they're going to be all you can talk to about some
All
things.
right.
So you got to really make sure that the personal dynamic is there and that you guys can work together and have a really strong relationship there. Um, but just as important as having a good co-founder is also having a strong home life as well. Because that's something that I think a lot of people at times neglect is, focusing so much on the business, they don't think about their life happiness. And that's where I think a lot of people crash out and burn and just get too much in the grind of things. Because if like you have a significant other and they're consistently battling you on the startup, hey, I want you home on weekends, don't check your email, you know, you're going to have all this friction and it's going to become them versus the company, just a losing battle either way.
Right.
So I'm very lucky to have a significant other that's been able to support me in this, who's been able to really be my biggest cheerleader and, pick up slack at times when I forget to vacuum because I'm too busy working.
Yeah.
So it's one of those things that's really important to have that good home base as well.
I've enjoyed the conversation. Thank you. A lot of the folks that watch the show, there's investors, but also a lot of founders looking to learn from people who have been there, and you're just getting to the good stuff after a lot of toil. So, what are some of the things that you would say if there was a 4 year ago David starting out again, places to go or things to not sweat or any other kind of wisdom you want to transfer?
You need less people working on something than you initially think you do. My first mindset is I need to go hire salespeople because I don't know how to sell.
Mhm.
They don't know what they're doing either. They're just billing you more for it. No one's going to be bigger at figuring out your hardest problems than you are.
Mhm.
And it's always the top answer to say, oh, I'm going to go find someone to do X. And, there's always this battle between doing what you're good at, between focusing your time on what the biggest challenge is. And, I'm now kind of under the mindset that sales was our biggest problem. I got heavily involved. And since then, it's our least problem. So definitely focus on tackling the biggest problems yourself.
Is there a flip side to that? Things that you spent time on that you wish you would have given to somebody else?
Anything to do with marketing. I cannot design a flyer for the life of me. The fact I ever tried is embarrassment.
Well, the fact that flyers are marketing is no.
No, I know. I tried to do some of the design stuff, and my current marketing team has it hung up on their wall as just an ode to where we've come.
Yeah.
So, overall, too, I would say really just finding that mentor who is there to really give you the advice. Something that investors try to beat into founders' heads all the time. It's sometimes the advice is worth more than the money. And that was true. We were focusing on the wrong business model altogether, and we could have got as much money as possible. That would have never worked. So having, specifically, it was Mark Sokol at Flawed Funders who said, no, idiot, don't do that. Focus on B2B, focus on this because you want reoccurring revenue. Investors know what they're talking about.
All right. Good advice. Thank you, sir. It's been a
No
pleasure.
worries.
All right.